everyone, and thanks for checking out the Indy Handshake Wrestling Podcast. My name is Paul Ponte. I am joined today by the proprietor, booker, promoter, whatever words you want to use, of the Underground Wrestling Alliance, UGWA, but more commonly and lovingly known as UGWA, Anthony Trevino. How are we doing today?
Doing great, man. Glad to be here. Glad you called it UGWA, not UGWA.
It's be a very, what is it, like a Eastern European thing, UGWA.
Yeah, some people call it that. Hey, you know what? Whatever.
UGWA. I love the fact that it's just UGWA. I love that people chant it. It's a good time.
Let me tell you, man, when I first started hearing that chant, it bothered me. I hated it so much, but it grew on me.
I like that it came naturally.
It really did.
Yeah.
It's like a chant, like some cavemen and shit. Just UGWA, UGWA.
Yeah, I feel like whenever nicknames are forced, like they don't catch on, it's only when it's literally naturally is when it works out. But before we get into UGWA, which we will, I want to know about the man, Anthony Trevino. I want to know how you're from San Jose originally, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Born and raised in East San Jose.
All right. I myself born on Eastside Drive over there in the East Side, so.
Eastside Drive? Really?
Yeah.
Well, then this story is it's a perfect segue because the UGWA formed on Eastside Drive. Legit.
No way.
Legit.
Behind the old Dairy Bell?
Yep, right there behind the old Dairy Bell. Just killing grass, patch of grass, and then go to the next patch of grass and kill that. Because we started front yard wrestling, not really backyard wrestling. We didn't have permission. We were just going to people's houses when they were at work.
Wow. Yeah, I lived on a duplex on Eastside Drive for the first 6 years of my life.
1990. You might have been some little kid rolling by on a tricycle when we started this shit, man. How old are you?
Oh no, I'm old, man. I'm 37, so I'm an old man.
Okay, maybe not then. Maybe we would have tried to recruit you to wrestle for us back then.
Yeah, if I would have stayed on the street, who knows? But you're obviously everyone watches wrestling on TV, blah blah. But how do you find out about independent pro wrestling?
So we started backyard wrestling in '96, and that was basically our little tiny world. We were just doing that. We were wrestling in front of nobody for years and years and years, and we were just having a good time doing it. Eventually, we grew up, and a couple guys started branching out to become pro wrestlers. One of those guys is Dave Dutra, and he went and he won a scholarship actually for Pro Wrestling Iron.
Mm-hmm.
Get trained there, and then he left. And back then it was like a mark of death to come from a backyard. So we literally had to delete all footage that he ever existed in UGWA because we didn't want him to get buried right out the box. We hid the fact he was from here. But when he started wrestling in APW, I went to a couple of his matches and that was cool. Then one day he hit me up and was like, "Hey, they need a camera guy. Can you come down here?" So me and one of the UGWA wrestlers went down there and we hopped on the camera, and that's basically the first steps into independent wrestling in the area for us. Really, it was camera in for APW.
Right on. Yeah, I had a very, very similar thing. I started out helping out at Big Time Wrestling, and then I was doing camera at APW. So very similar openings into the world of indie wrestling for both of us here. Yeah.
Good cameramen are hard to find.
Yeah, definitely.
Not so much now, I'd say. Now there's a bunch of good cameramen out there, but back then it was hard to find somebody that wasn't doing this with the camera,
Yeah. Although it is funny too, because we've been releasing so many old matches, and so many times we're like, did no one tell the ringside guy not to stand in front of the hard cam? Why is this always happening? And I realized I was like, dang, people before didn't really pay attention to that kind of thing. But now I'm watching old footage and it irks me so bad.
Oh, I feel your pain, bro. I do the same thing. I'll just get lost in bad camera work and just stop enjoying what I'm watching. It's hilarious.
I'm like, what? You have the same angle as the hard cam. Why are you standing there? Move. Go to the side. Anyway, yeah. Speaking of backyard wrestling, did those WWE, remember the "Don't try this at home" with the sappy music? Those commercials they would play on Raw. Whatever you do, don't try this at home. We're trained professionals. Did that work on anyone? Because everyone I know backyard wrestled.
Yeah, we were backyard wrestling before there was a term backyard wrestling.
Yeah, and then those backyard wrestling DVDs came out, and everyone was like, What is all this?
Everybody was trying to get on that shit. Like, I think
Yeah.
we got like a 15-second clip on there, and we thought we were like the bee's knees. We were like, yeah, look at that. We got 15 seconds on like a little playlist of like people getting slammed on their head. We've made the big time, guys.
Yeah, and M-Dog 20 was on there as well. That was great. He was like the one who really broke out of that and really made a legit career out of himself. But
Definitely. Somebody had to, right?
yeah.
Somebody's got to be the Justin Timberlake of the group.
So when you were starting to watch, indies, who started to catch your eye in the Bay Area?
At that point, when Dutra was like coming up, I think Tim Thatcher was wrestling a lot over there. Adam Thornstowe, they called. Why is his name slipping my mind? Oliver John. I almost forgot his name for a second there.
Big boy.
Oliver John, yeah, he's the shit. Like back then, like those are the guys that I first saw, and I was like, these guys are like legit like wrestlers, man. So it just opened my eyes to a whole new kind of wrestling, because I was really like, I had no idea that indie wrestling really existed, other than like, Beyond the Mat and shit like that, and like maybe like if an indie show was attached to a fair or something like that, I happened to be at the fair, I'd walk by like, oh, all right, there's some luchadors over there, but I really didn't know shit about it.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people watch Beyond the Mat were just like, oh, so there's like a few of these here and there. And then once you start getting into it, you're like, oh, there's a shit ton of indie promotions. And then there's a lot that last, a show. So that's about it, because it's really hard to make money. So when you're doing backyard shows,
a lot of those popping up with that stimmy money in the next like few months.
There you go. Oh yeah, for sure. Everyone has horror stories, wrestlers on here, about like, so I did a show. It was the promoter's first time, and I was like, oh, I already know. It's like, you didn't get paid, did you? Nope. It's just like, that's what happens. But so you're doing backyard shows. At what point did you decide we can transition this from a backyard show into like a legit quote unquote show?
Around 2012, around 2010, we started drawing a crowd. Like we had like 150 people back there. It was mainly because we were doing baby oil bikini wrestling, and we had free beer, so that would bring everybody to the show. But then they'd stay for the wrestling. And then by 2012, we were like doing full-fledged, storylines, wrestling every 2 weeks. Had huge crowds back there, and there was just this moment where like, it was our big payoff show, Devil's Night, which is like our WrestleMania at the end of the year, or our Halloween Havoc, I'd say, I guess. And, the big climax to a big storyline we did all year, like, finally happened. And the crowd erupts, and it's the craziest shit that I ever saw, where just this entire backyard is like rocking. And I was like, I think we got something here, And a couple years after that, we did the Sofa Street Fair in San Jose, and somebody from the Ritz saw us there, and then they offered us a spot in the Ritz, and we just took the backyard show into the Ritz, and we've been refining it over the years. But the first couple years at the Ritz was just backyard wrestling with a roof and good lighting. But it's been a road, and we're finally, I think, reaching the point where I'd say we're probably a real independent wrestling organization now, I'd say.
I mean, you're taking people bookings from, people who aren't necessarily always in the area. So I would say, at that point, what's the difference between a quote real indie promotion and what you're doing? If you got trained guys who are working in a real ring, at that point, it's kind of what it is, right?
Yeah,
but
it was a long road to break the stigma, but I mean, like, really the only thing that changed was a roof over our heads.
There you go. When you're doing backyards and you have, 150, 200 people back there, how many times are the cops coming? And have you had to, refund everyone, break up a show, do that kind of thing?
Ironically, the only time that's ever happened was this very last yard show that we tried to book last month, which was going to be the last yard show. That was the only time that it got shut down before it even got its feet underneath it. We came up from like 2010 to I don't know what year. I guess 2015 is when we really kind of stopped doing yard shows and went straight to the Ritz. But San Jose PD had they were really low on cops. So they had a no noise complaint response policy. Like if somebody's not squirting blood out of their, or something like that, it's just like, hey, these kids are playing their music loud on a Saturday. Then they're just like, all right, whatever, we don't care. So we benefited from that for a long time, and we never really got broken up. And like the one time I think the cops showed up, we had a guy dressed like a monkey and a guy dressed like Michael Jackson wrestling in a wrestling match. So they walked back there, they saw that, and they're like, all right, we don't need to be here. And they left. Very next match was a death match, and there was blood squirting everywhere. So if they would have been like 10 minutes later, that would have been a different story.
Yeah, they would have been like, what the fuck is going on back here? Oh, man. That's insane. At that point, you just go, it's like a birthday party, right? Like it's for kids or something. You could just lie.
Like, it's just like Michael Jackson. He's a monkey. Look at it.
Yeah. It's just a bunch of nonsense. You guys can leave. So now for the Sofa Street Fair, like, how do you approach them? Do you just say like, oh, we're a wrestling company and we want to do pro wrestling? Like, is that what you come up with when you talk to them?
They actually approached us.
Interesting.
Bill Mascara, who runs the Sofa Street Fair and a bunch of like sofa activities in that area, he's like our fairy godfather. You know what I mean? Like he's like opened a lot of doors for us. He's the one that actually helped us get the Level Up as well. I approached Level Up, but I had no idea that before that, like literally the day before that, Phil hit them up and was like, "Hey, you guys should work with UGWA." And then I hit them up and I was like, "Hey, I want to do something with you." And they're like, "We just heard about you guys," like, and it just worked out, So that guy, like, props to him. He's pretty responsible for helping get eyeballs on UGWA out there.
And how do you go about? So, you're the booker man, you're the boss man. Obviously, you get to know a lot of these wrestlers. How do you balance, what is a friendly relationship with being, the person that, books them for shows? I mean, do you ever have people who are like, "Hey, brother, how come you haven't booked me in a while?" You know what I mean? Like stuff like that kind of thing.
Like for a long time, this shit was just for like shits and giggles. We were just, it's just for my friends and we're having a good time. I didn't take it very seriously until maybe about 2 years ago. That's when I like really was like, all right, I want to like live off this. Like, I don't want to like, I want to quit my day job, like basically. And then
COVID happened, so perfect timing. Everything worked out great.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we were getting it started. Like 2019 was a very good year for us, and the beginning of 2020 was too. But anyways, I decided I wanted to, take this shit serious. So I told all the guys that I had on my roster, all the yarders for all these years, I was like, look, guys, like, step up your game. It's time. We've been preparing for this for a long time. We're here. So it's either, rise to the occasion or, step aside. And some folks stepped aside and some folks rose to the occasion. And I hold that same policy for all the pros that we bring in. And even though I've become friends with a lot of these guys, if they're not holding their weight on the show, I'm trying to put it together the best TV show possible. If they're not holding their weight, then, somebody else might come along and take that spot. Not to be a jerk or anything, but I mean, I'm trying to put out the best product possible and make this whole area look good,
Yeah. And you don't have to name any names, but are there people that like you're kind of like, damn, we were cool. I don't know why they have to be so bitter about it, but like now they're kind of like they hold grudges because they're not getting booked or anything like that?
No, not at all. Actually,
okay.
I don't think there's anybody like that. Thankfully, there's a good crop of people around here. There's a lot of like old timey like carny shit that floated around this area for a long time that kind of weighed it down. And I think a lot of those weights are starting to be lifted as the power is kind of shifted around this area a little bit. We're not as low on the totem pole as we used to be. And I'm trying to be a positive, representation for the area,
Yeah. Is there anything that you thought, okay, since we're trying not to have the stigma of backyard, is there anything that you're like, I definitely just don't want this kind of thing at the show anymore? Like anything that used to go on where you're kind of like, that shit needs to get cut out. Like we don't want to, I don't know. I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. the only thing I would say is like I don't want people that are out of shape and shouldn't be in the ring getting blown up. I don't want that. But as far as content goes, like I think wrestling's like it's like 31 flavors. You know what I mean? You can have your dildos, you can have your death matches, you can have your flippy shit, you could have your catch can style, you can have your like strong style, have it all on the exact same show. And if you pace it right and present it properly, everybody will enjoy a little bit of everything. And if, one of those things isn't their cup of tea, go hit the bar that match,
Yeah, I like that style. Yeah, 31 flavors, that's a perfect way to put it. I always put it as like a buffet. It's like, you want to be able to sample everything, And also, there is especially when shows can run, 2-3 hours, sometimes watching the exact same match over and over again, that's a bit of overkill,
I think the money spot for a wrestling show is like 2 hours and 50 minutes. Like if you can wrap it up at that point, like I don't know, there's something like preconditioned from those old pay-per-view days in our brains to just be like, this is all the wrestling I can take at one time.
Yeah, definitely. And even then, you still need like an intermission, and and you gotta have
the pick me up, the let me up match.
Yeah, and you gotta have a little bit of fucking around. You gotta have a little promo time. Just a little bit of stuff to ease what's going on. And what do you think? Because you see indies run and then you decide, okay, so I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to do things. What are some of the things that you believe that UGWA brings to the table that's different than what other indies in the area bring?
What we bring to the table is we're outside the box. We're not trying to, like, a lot of places that I see out there kind of have this like WWE cover band like style of presentation. I want to present it as like Rocky Horror, or like a Alice Cooper concert. We have like a more metal vibe to it. We're in a concert venue where, all these different bands play all the time at the Ritz, and we kind of adopted that style to it. You know what I mean? I want it to be a bigger presentation overall than just, like, I don't know, what I see on TV every Monday nights, and because that's stale. I mean, it fits its spot. You know what I mean, like for a general audience or whatever. But that's not really my cup of tea. I like to spice it up a little bit with wrestling. Like it's a very fluid form of performing art, I guess.
Okay, and what would you say? Let's go with because these might not necessarily be on the same show. What do you think is your favorite show that UGWA has put on so far? And what do you think is your favorite match that you've seen in an UGWA show?
My favorite show that we've put on, it might be Devil's Night. It's Devil's Night 15, the one that we have on IWTV. I start forgetting the order of the numbers and shit for all these. So it's either 14 or 15, whichever one's on there. That show's top to bottom amazing. And then Megalomania, which is also on that, Megalomania 5. That was the show that we ended up, just by luck, ended up having MVP on the show. Zicky Dice debuted on that one. And that was like the genesis of like the professional wrestling UGWA, I think, right there in that one. So you know what? I'll say Megalomania 5. There we go. That's
okay.
My favorite. Favorite match? Damn. Maybe Dutra versus Matt Fury 1 was possibly my favorite match. I mean, that's probably got a little asterisk on it now because Matt Fury has been cast aside for reasons. But but if you just judge that match on match alone, that match is amazing.
Let's see how I can put this. So let's say you have a dream booking. And you shouldn't say this because you're the booker and you don't want to have to overpay for someone. But you want to. but let's say you can get like one guy from the indie scene that you really want to have in an UGWA show. Who would you have, and who would you have him face off against?
Well, I had Chris Bay versus Zicky Dice booked right before the pandemic. That was the show that got shut down right at the beginning, at the beginning of the pandemic. I had Tony Deppen booked to come out to wrestle Dave Dutra. I I don't know if the Bay versus Zicky one's going to happen since Zicky moved out to Georgia, but I still can. I'll still probably try to make that Deppen one with Dutra happen. I want to bring Daniel Garcia in. I'm a big fan of his work. I can't really think of anybody else off top right now that I really want to have. I do have a big matchup coming for the next show on 5/22. We got Juicy versus Dutra for the UGWA title.
Stoked for that. That should be good.
Yeah. Megalomania 6 is going to be 6/19, and there'll be a debut there that's going to be kind of shocking for some folks because back in the days, this was one of the people that was pretty vocal about how we should all just stop doing what we're doing because we're ruining the business. So it'll be a surprise when we announce it. But they'll be facing the winner of Juicy and Dutra.
That's an excellent tease. I love a good tease when it comes to a show. That's how you're a promoter, brother. There you go. That's fantastic. So when you're promoting shows and you have these guys coming in that you don't necessarily know, all that stuff, has there ever been like any clashes of personalities when you have an outsider coming in and they kind of, meet up with the guys who used to be yarders with you guys, like that kind of thing?
There's a couple cats in the area that are they asked to get booked for a long time. I was friendly with them. I finally booked them, and then they were just kind of jerks backstage like all day and just like didn't let the tag team they wrestled get like anything in on them, and then they just like buried the show afterwards. And then I was like, all right, I don't want to book these guys anymore. But then they just kept like would continue to throw shade throughout the years. So I mean, I'd say other than those guys, that's the only real like negative experience as far as with bringing somebody in to book them. Well, no, there's somebody else too that went off to go run shows somewhere else far, far away. But we won't talk about him. But yeah, that was about it. Like two instances that I can think of in all these years. Really, that's it.
Okay. And I don't know what it is too about indie guys. I feel like sometimes they come in with like this crazy ego, and it's kind of like, hey, we're all like, we're not weird because I'm not in it, but like I would think an indie worker would be like, hey, like we're all on the indie scene together. Like this is, how punk rock this is. This is so great. Look at this camaraderie. And instead they come in with like a big head. Like I don't get that. I don't understand it. But
I mean, a healthy dose of ego is good, but it's got to be like realistic, and you can't let the ego overwhelm being like a nice person, like nobody on the level of indie wrestling where you're wrestling at UGWA should be big timing anybody. Like if you're in that locker room, like that's silly to big time anybody. You know what I mean? Especially if, you haven't done anything out there, I'll take a level of shit. I remember one time years ago, we were having a house party here at the UGWA house, and Bailey was here because she went to high school with one of our wrestlers, KP. She was here, and one of our bikini wrestlers was like talking to her or something, and she was like, Bailey's like, oh, I'm a wrestler. Then she was like, oh, I'm a wrestler too. And I remember Bailey's like, no, you're not. And I was like, and then years later she became a WWE champ. So I was like, fuck yeah, I'll take that criticism. Yeah. WWE women champs like talking shit to you. That's okay. I'll take that shit.
Yeah. I mean, especially when somebody's like an indie wrestler, there's also a thing of like, there is a fine line where you're like, I've paid money to go to training. These bumps fucking hurt. And they're like, this person's coming telling me they're a wrestler. And I can understand someone's being like a little bit frustrated, being like, oh, well.
I get it. I get it. Because that was just, big oil bikini wrestlers back then. They're not real wrestlers, but you know what? They drew better than most real wrestlers. I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm. So kind of going into that, probably something that, wouldn't be going on today of baby oil bikini wrestling. But you've actually have a very, I love the crass yet very progressive message of hashtag more gay shit. Wrestling is gay, all that good stuff. Was that like a specific effort you wanted to make sure to be like, hey, this is an all-inclusive thing. This is something that, you know, we want to make sure people know that this isn't like the old boys club of like homophobia and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely. We're trying to let everybody know that, you know, we're open to everybody, you know. Come if you're into wrestling, that's the only prerequisite basically. And San Jose is basically like that in general. If you go to like downtown San Jose, the atmosphere is very accepting of all types of people. You know, one of our main wrestlers, KP, he runs the Circus of Sin, which is a burlesque show out of the Caravan. They've gone online, you know, during the pandemic and everything, but you know, he brings a whole different kind of audience, and that whole more gay shit thing is really what revolves out of him, you know.
Yeah, and speaking of, you know, the San Jose area with promoting wrestling, you know, there's been a lot of talk with the Bay Area, you know, the island, the island of wrestling, where wrestlers don't get their due.
The black hole.
Yeah, wrestlers don't get their due. They have to leave. They have to go to Atlanta. They have to go to Florida. They have to do all this. Why do you think that is? And what do you think people can do to try to break out of this island mentality of the Bay Area?
For a long time, I think the promotions out here were just happy with drawing a house. They weren't really like, you know, they were filming the shows, but I mean, nobody was really releasing any footage. So nobody saw it but the people that were there. So how is anybody anywhere else going to give a shit if they can't see it, you know? And that was just the way it was for a long time, it seemed like, you know? And that's something we've always tried to do, is just like get stuff out there, you know, put a match on YouTube every once in a while, at the very least, something, you know, get your stuff out there and put some effort into the production, you know, don't just throw some like terrible angled out, you know, stuff out there. Don't put anybody on your camera. Like try, you know, take some pride in the way that it looks. Try to draw some eyeballs to it, you know, and that's what we try to do at least.
Yeah, and you put it on you have it on independentwrestling.tv, right? So
yeah,
how
we got that, and our YouTube channel.
Yeah, there you go.
And a website coming soon.
Yeah, I always thought about that when it came to like Pro Wrestling Iron, because I was there helping out at Pro Wrestling Iron in the beginning. And I'm just thinking about, like, you know, obviously it was different then. There wasn't like, you couldn't just stream wrestling anytime you felt like it. There was no WWE network. So there was no idea of like, oh, we could just put wrestling on the internet and everyone could just watch it, an entire show. You know, you don't have to do tape trading or any of that bullshit. So I thought, like, you know, I'm thinking about like the Pro Wrestling Iron show where, like, imagine if they had live streaming capabilities. And they're like, we're going to have a live stream pay-per-view. We have Misawa, we have Ogawa, we have all these guys. And I'm like, oh my God, the money that you could make off of that, as opposed to back then when it's like they made nothing off of it. And it sucks. But I guess, you know, the times.
They printed 120 DVDs, you know, and that was it or something, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bummer. And have you noticed a particular uptick in, like, once you were actually on independentwrestling.tv as far as like subscribers, followers, or just merch buying or anything like that?
I think we probably need to get a few more shows out there on there before that'll really start hitting. What helped a lot is trying to get as many photographers and stuff like that to come to the show, so that there's just content constantly getting pushed out, you know, from whenever we do stuff. That helps a lot. I would say finally figuring out how to use Twitter helps a lot, because for a long time I was just grandpa mode, and I was just like, I'm not, you know, I just had there was an UGWA Twitter that was just floating there in the, you know, in the internet. But I finally, you know, started utilizing that, and learning to use that a little bit helps with net worth quite a bit.
Yeah, wrestling gifs, huge on Twitter.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, by the way, I wanted to personally thank you for putting on a show, because getting to photograph wrestling again was something I missed so badly. It felt so good to just be like, I can't believe it.
Getting to write wrestling again too, man. I was fiending, dude. I had books and binders of things written in various scenarios, because I didn't know who was going to be on the roster. I just couldn't help it. You know what I mean? Like I literally cannot help but to like shoot like wrestling bookings and storylines out of my ass, like all day, every day.
Yeah, that was my first UGWA show, the last one, the Among the Living show, because it was always one of those things where I was like, oh, I'll go to one of these eventually. Like, you know what I mean? Because like when something's around all the time, you take it for granted. It's like why I've never been to Alcatraz because it's always there, and I'm like, one day. But if one thing COVID taught me was that like me going, I'll go to the next one. I'll go to the next one. And then all of a sudden I couldn't go to anything, and it drove me insane.
You don't know what you got till it's gone.
Yeah. Oh, man. All right, brother. We're going to go ahead and enter the next segment of the podcast, the Take It Home segment. Speaking of which, have you ever had to rush out and tell someone to take it the fuck home because they were going too long?
Oh, all the fucking time. One of my best friends, Ogman, I'll usually send him to the ring, which is the most non-conspicuous thing you can possibly do, because I'm sending like a 6'4", black dude out there in a purple sweater, and he's reaching into the ring and grabbing the referee, and it's like, oh, that's not, that's not, inconspicuous at all. And then he's like telling him, like, tell him to wrap it up. And then, so if you ever see him walk out there, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I won't say who it is, but there is a local promoter who I saw pacing back and forth because the wrestlers weren't taking it home. And eventually he just kind of walked up to the ring and just went, take it the fuck home! Right in the middle of a show. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. But, I laughed. I thought it was hilarious. But all right. This one kind of is just an all-around wrestling question. This kind of has to do with, big-time wrestlers or indie wrestlers, whoever you're thinking of. If Andre is the 8th wonder of the world, who are the 7 wonders of wrestling for you? The 7 wrestlers who you think these people embody wrestling for me.
7 wrestlers. All right, let's go with Bret Hart. Go with Eddie Guerrero. We'll go with Sandman. We'll go with Owen Hart. Go with Rey Mysterio. Let's throw Mr. Perfect and Rick Rude.
Such a great mix of different people. I love that you have Mr. Perfect and the Sandman in the same grouping. I friggin' love that. That's my favorite. All right. How far have you taken UGWA out of San Jose ever?
We ran a show in the Gilman once in Berkeley. I think to this day it's still the only wrestling show that ever happened there. It wasn't an official UGWA show, but it was an UGWA show. Okay. That we ran a show at an art show in San Francisco called Oddtropolis. That was odd because that crowd was there for like a little hipster art show, and then all of a sudden we gave them a death match with Guido.
There you
go. That's about as far as we've gone so far. I am planning to expand. I'm working on Vegas. So,
okay.
Yeah, I got to get my jeans suit ready. My jean jacket, so I can go in there like Randall Flagg and stand.
Well, if you've ever traveled with any wrestlers or anything like that, or any road stories that involve wrestling with you.
Some road stories from wrestling. Damn. Probably not. I don't got anything too exciting. I remember at one of the West Coast shows right before the pandemic shut down, me and KG are like sitting at a table at the commentary table before the show. And then I feel something brush my leg under the table. And I look at KG and like, he's looking at me like kind of the same way I'm looking at him. And then the table starts moving. And then we're like, what the fuck? And then AJ Gray just emerges from under the table where he was sleeping. That's a weird story. That one sticks with me. That's all I got.
Okay. You mentioned writing wrestling, and I always say that wrestling is a very creative thing when it comes to storylines or even, crafting matches and everything like that. If not wrestling, what is your creative outlet?
I'd probably be writing comic books if I wasn't writing wrestling. I pretty much am writing comic books, but with human beings instead of fictional characters on a page. If you watch enough UGWA shows back to back to back, you'll see, like, if you watch every show that we have, IWTV, there's a progressing story arc from beginning to end that you'll notice. And I try really hard to have story arcs and like payoffs for everything, and everything matters, and everything leads to something else, which is a very comic booky thing to do.
What is your favorite move or hold?
My favorite move when I was actively wrestling in the old yard, I did a flatliner I called the slashback. So I'll say that's my favorite move. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Obviously, UGWA is a riotous, raucous event. What are some crazy fan interactions you've had at UGWA events?
Oh shit. Crazy fan interactions. I'm like trying to think back to the yard days. I remember there was a wrestler at a yard show who took a fan into our shed, and they were doing something in the shed, and fans were surrounding the shed and chanting the wrestler's name while I was in there. That was a silly time. I'm telling you, those old yard shows, man, that was like some like Motley Crue like backstage concert shit going on. But trying to think what else, what other weird fan interactions have we ever had? I don't know. That's probably at the top of the list, man. I can't think of anything else. Our fans are pretty cool, man. They get it, you know. Like I always say, like we don't have we're starting to get more wrestling fans, but for the longest time we didn't have wrestling fans. We had UGWA fans, and like most of our fans had no idea that any of this other stuff even existed.
Anyone ever get too drunk and either get handsy with any of the talent or try to get in the ring?
A couple times maybe, but we can usually talk them down pretty easily. Like it wasn't like some crazy like, you know, shit show where they got the shit beat out of them.
No one went Scott Hall on them?
Yeah. You know, we just guide them down like, no, you're not doing that. Come over here. You don't want to get in that ring. Those wrestlers will kill you.
When you're booking wrestlers and you have them working in the ring, what's the one thing that you hate to see in a match? Like when two wrestlers get in there and like they do a certain, whether it's a certain spot or just a certain thing where you're like, ugh, like I can't stand when people do this. I prefer if they just cut this out entirely.
I hate that like nerve hold on the side right here when it's like, I hate that move. I hate the stinger splash in the corner. I had a rule for a while that you weren't allowed to do stinger splashes just because like I had so many people that were just doing it just instinctively. It was like do a back elbow in the corner or something, fucking anything else. But I don't know. Those are just a couple moves that like I don't like very much. I don't like the schoolboy roll up. If you're gonna do a roll up like for a pin, like there's way fancier roll ups. Do something flashy for a second. Don't just do the old, you know, like
yeah.
That's about it.
I always laughed because I forgot who was talking about it, but somebody was just like, you know, the surprise roll up finish is just really dumb because are they positing that in the middle of the match someone just wasn't paying attention, so that's why they got pinned? Like not because they were too tired, not because you know what I mean, like they got finished. Like it's literally they were just like, what? Oh no, a 3 count. How? Like
they flipped on a banana peel and shit. You know what I mean? Like there's so many cool roll ups. Like do like a my style cradle or something fancy just to like, oh, and I locked them in it. You know, then they won.
When has you booked someone at a show and they legitimately surprised you in the ring? Maybe you heard something bad about them before and they turned out to be amazing, something like that, where you're just like, wow, I wasn't really too familiar with them, or just anything where you were like, this person, I could not believe this person did this.
I know exactly the spot. If you watch our Rumble at the Ritz, is it 3? I think the one that's on IWTV. There's a guy in the Rumble. His name's Sick Case. All right. Somebody called out, and I just needed a fill-in guy. Right. He had wrestled with some of my guys up in Stack, and I wasn't super familiar with them. But I was like, all right, you got like 4 minutes in this thing. You're gonna like come in, come out. That's it, you know. And in that 4 minutes, he like stole the entire show, you know, in 4 minutes because he came out and walks up to KP and he's like, "Oh, I'm such a big fan. Can I suck your dick?" He's like, can I suck his dick? And the fans are all, suck his dick. So he like drops to his knees, and then KP pulls out his giant dildo. And then right before he does it, he looks at it, and he's like, well, but he spits on it. And it's like the moment he spits on it, the whole crowd just erupts. And I'm just like, I can't believe this is happening in a wrestling ring. This is hilarious. and from that point forward, I booked him. He had to retire because of medical reasons, but I mean, he earned a spot on the show after that, like on every show afterwards.
Way to maximize your minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Has there been a time, and I only ask this is not a judgment on you. I only ask this because I always ask every wrestler, has a booker tried to stiff you on money? I will ask you, have you had to stiff anyone on money ever before?
No, I try not to.
Good. That's a good one. How inverse that? Have you ever had somebody be like, hey, I know we agreed on this much beforehand, but do you think maybe we can get a little bit more? Maybe they saw the house was big and they were like, oh, maybe I could try to squeeze a little more out of this.
Not really. I'm pretty stern about it. I'm pretty cut and dry when I'm like negotiating with folks. So it's like, we get it all laid out beforehand. Nobody's ever tried to pull any shenanigans on me.
That's good. What's a mistake you made running UGWA that turned out to be in like the better before because of it? Like you thought, oh man, I can't believe like this thing got canceled, but then we had to do this, or maybe someone canceled on you, but then blah, blah. Either way, just something that happened that you thought at the time was something that sucked and then it ended up being a good thing.
Well, I mean, the whole pandemic kind of worked out for us because we like kind of went into overdrive with like putting shows out and everything like that. And it really gave us enough time to like prep for this. It gave us a pause. We didn't really need the pause, but it gave us a pause, and we kind of sprung back like a rubber band from it. So, I mean, I'd hate to say, this whole thing with the pandemic, but that's really all that I could think of right off the top.
Okay. What's the hardest you've laughed at an indie show?
That dildo spot that I was talking about earlier might have been it, dude. Because like I was literally up, like me and KG were both like crying up in the commentary booth. Like, I think you could hear us like we're like holding the mics away, but I think you can still hear us like laughing.
And you book a lot of guys, you see a lot of guys, you've been to other indie shows, so this isn't necessarily an UGWA thing. It could be an any indie thing. What is the worst gimmick you have seen?
The worst gimmick that I've seen in wrestling. Fuck, it's probably something I booked myself, man. I don't know, man. I can't think of anything really bad off the top of my head. Yeah, because the thing with a gimmick is like the worst gimmick you've ever seen on one guy can be the best gimmick you've ever seen on another guy. You know what I mean? So it's really like a combination of the performer and how much they're feeling the character or whatnot. So like there is no such thing as a bad gimmick, just a bad performer.
Okay. What about as far as gimmick, as far as gear? What are some overused gear right now that wrestlers are doing, or just gear that irks you? I'll give an example. For me, if you wear kick pads and you don't throw kicks, what are you doing? So for me, that's my little irk, where like I see a guy with kick pads and he throws no kicks, I get upset.
I used to wrestle in Converse, cut-off T-shirt, and some jean shorts, so I'm not too critical about people's wrestling gear. So
you wore the early 2000s indie special gear, jean shorts and a cut-off T-shirt. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you got it. So yeah, I'm not too critical of people's gear. You know what I mean? People wear what they can wear. Like I still got some guys wrestling in T-shirts and garbage bag pants on my show. So you know what I mean? I'm more of the performance. The gear doesn't bother me too much.
Oh yeah,
that's all. If they want to look silly as fuck in there, that's on them.
I still don't know how Kevin Owens got away with wearing a T-shirt on WWE TV, to be honest with you. I still think
that's basically my gear that I used to wear. Just my panza wasn't quite as round, but it was close.
Yeah, I still think like somehow it's under the radar. Like someone he's convinced someone that it's a specialized T-shirt made of something, because I don't understand.
There's on underneath. There's gear underneath at least.
Yeah. So we kind of already went over this one, but as far as guys thinking they're bigger than the show, as far as wrestlers, maybe let's say, actually, let's go into this one because we already talked about wrestlers who thought they were bigger than the show. Has there been a time when maybe San Jose, the Bay Area, brother, indies are snug, brother. Everyone loves to work snug, and it's great. I love it. I think it's I love hearing that sound when a forearm really pops that side of the neck. But has there been a time when maybe a wrestler got a little overzealous in the ring, and you kind of had to deal with maybe backstage, hey, it's okay, guys. Let's there's no reason to get pissed. Anything like that?
No, man. Everybody's they're into it, man. We got death matches on our shows regular. We're taking it easy at Level Up because it's all ages, which is something new for us. They serve food and stuff, so people aren't trying to have light tube shards in their in their chili or whatever.
Yeah.
But
no one wants blood in their tater tots. It's
exactly. Yeah. So we're taking it easy, but we got death. It's hard for somebody to cry about getting a little snug when the next match is about to get a gusset plate in their forehead. You know what I mean? Puts things into perspective.
I suppose that's true. Yeah. Speaking of which, about working snug and everything. Actually, no, that's not even what the transition is. I just wanted to ask, why you didn't end up continuing wrestling.
Well, I'm 5'6" and 150 pounds soaking wet. I started backyard wrestling when I was 12, and we learned the hard way back then. You know what I mean? There was nobody showing us how to do things properly. We were trial and error. So there was a lot of neck bumps, on solid ground. And I fucked my neck up pretty bad doing it back then. And, I wouldn't hold up physically. You know what I mean? And I'm better as the brains of the operation. You know what I mean? I write a better wrestling match than I perform. That's for sure.
Okay. And I will finish off with this. I call it the touchy-feely question of the podcast. It is your pure joy in wrestling. The moment during a show where you get the goosebumps, you get this wave wash over you. We're like, this is why I fucking love wrestling. This is why I love the business.
I expect certain emotional, or I'm trying to pull certain emotions out from each story that we write and things like that. And whenever something hits the way that I mean for it to hit, and the crowd makes the noise that I want, it's I'm playing music. You know what I mean? And every time that happens and it pans out, they gasp when I want them to, or anytime I get that control over their emotions for that split second, I dig that shit. It's a trip.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Please put yourself over, put over UGWA, give us all that social media, all that good stuff, and future events.
We're at official UGWA on Twitter. We're at Hail UGWA on Instagram. Just UGWA on Facebook for all the old folks that are still on Facebook, like my parents. That's where they can follow us. But if you're cool, then yeah, we're on all those other fucking platforms. We also got 3 shows coming up. 522, a new level from Level Up. 619, Megalomania Sticks from Level Up. And 717, Name to be Determined, coming up. So there's 3 more shows for the summer right there. Come support. Tickets are $40. The second that we're able to just open up the gates, the price will drop on the tickets, I promise. But we gotta, if you want quality, unfortunately, $40. I feel guilty charging $40, but it is what it is. But come on out, grab some grub at Level Up, play some video games, and watch some UGWA.
There you go. And plus, great beer, good times. It's a
beer,
good, it's good everything. It is funny though, because I'm a total kind of a beer snob, and it's funny because I was there and I was like, oh, what's that beer right there? The guy's like, oh, it's an IPA. I was like, oh, was it a hazy, or is it and he's just like, ugh, and he just went and poured it, and he grabbed a little bit of, he's all here, for me to try, and I'm like, okay, my bad, dude. It was hella funny. I was like, all right, I get it. This guy's like, dude, I'm just serving the beer, man. What do you want from me? It was a lot of fun, though. I had a great time. I thought it was fantastic. It was great having you on the show. I appreciate you being on here. Please, everyone, check out UGWA, check out all that stuff. And remember to keep an eye out for that big announcement about that surprise person?
We will be announcing the surprise at the next show. It will happen at some point on the next show. We will have a video call-in from that person, and we will present who it is at that point.
A video run-in, brother. I love it. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate you for being on.